So for our live code section, I'm going to ask that the audience please open the Alpaca historical data notebook and follow along with us. So this one we're going to get a little bit more complicated when it comes to calls, passing information, and then what we have to do massage wise. But I think again it's going to be pretty simple to follow once we go through this line by line and kind of explain to each of our audience members what is occurring. So very similar to our last input with Y Finance, we are going to call that Alpaca Trade API, and in this one we're going to call it as Trade API. For our example here, we are also going to import pandas as PD. So we're going to import the pandas module very simply for this example so that we can read our credentials file. So obviously for these examples, I cannot show you my username and password. That's why we had you set up this credentials file earlier in the course before we started, so that we can follow along and have the same notebooks and you guys aren't seeing different things and we're not having to bounce back and forth. So very simply, all that we're doing with this pandas call is importing a read JSON from the pandas module so that we can parse from our credentials files the Alpaca API and our Alpaca secret so that we don't have to again bounce around here in our video clips. So very simply, again, we're importing those two modules, assigning our credentials to the text out of our credentials JSON file. From there, we are going to come down to our API as in our documentation example, and we're going to assign our API as the Trade API from our Alpaca Trade API. We're going to pass it our credentials for the Alpaca. So within our notebook, it'll be alpaca.alpaca API and our alpaca.alpaca secret, which is referring to our API key and our secret from that we assigned to our JSON credentials files earlier in the course. We are going to tell it to also reference our paper account and that we are using version 2 of their API. So this is important to note that when we work with Alpaca, you have to tell it where to grab the historical information, what you're using. So in this, we are going to use the paper section of Alpaca. You can remove that paper portion, get to the live market data once you get to the point where you're done with testing and you want to access your account with the real information. For our market data, it's going to be the same, it's going to be very similar, but when you start accessing your real account information, this is where that's going to become vital, that you pay attention to which of these you're calling. So for this, again, we're on the paper side. We don't want to mess with anything while we're doing our testing with our live account. So here in the paper portion, we're just assigning our API to our user credentials under the paper section. From there, we're going to assign our bar set variable to the API.getBarSet call that we reviewed in our data. We're going to pass it the Apple ticker. We're going to tell it that we want minute data, so we would like data to the minute interval, and we would like the last 240 data points, or 2 days worth of data points, for our data frame. So this here is going to also convert us to a data frame. So this is going to be very helpful because when you do the bar set, and I can even show you what that looks like after we run this, but when you do the bar set and you don't convert it to that data frame, it's going to be very hard to read. It's going to be very hard for us to massage later, and if you go ahead and try to export it, you're not going to have very much luck with that on that side either. So you know what, why don't I go ahead and show you what that looks like. We're going to comment out our code, and I would just recommend watching me for this section before you try to follow along, but we're going to go ahead and run this section, and I'll show you what the bar set looks like raw. So you can see these raw bar set feedbacks with that close, high, low, open, volume data that's being reported for each of those last 240 data points. And to make that, again, easier to use, easier to manipulate, we're going to go ahead and create that to our data frame. I'm going to go ahead and uncomment this section, and we will go ahead and rerun our code. Okay, so now this has had time to execute. we're going to rerun our bar set as well, and now you can see that it has reconverted this bar set to a data frame with our .df here that actually makes it readable, similar to our Y Finance. So that's one of the other good things about Y Finance, is it actually automatically does this for you, but you can see it's pretty easy to do even with this bar set data. So very similar to Y Finance, we get that open high, low, close volume data for that Y Finance ticker. Pay attention here, again, last 240 data points. So this is just last 240 data points at that minute interval that we requested to be assigned to bar set. From there, you might also notice that we have another layer. So if you're calling multiple tickers, so some of these allow you to call multiple tickers and get these different bar sets, they want you to be able to differentiate between the ones that you're calling. So for our specific example, and what we're going to use later, you're only calling one. So for me, when I like to play with these and manipulate them down the road, I do not like to have this in here, because I have to specify, I want the Apple high, Apple open, Apple lows, or Apple low instead. I want to be able to just very easily interact and say I want the open piece of information from this when we go to massage it later. So this second call down here is actually going to further trim this data frame and actually remove the layer, the top index layer here, and just give me only the Apple indexes of open, high, low, and close. So when I ran this, I showed you what the bar set looks like, but I'm going to go ahead and clear the output, and I'm going to show you what the Apple bars looks like, which this is also in your notebook, so you just need to go ahead and click run and execute, and you'll see that it removed that top index layer of Apple. Alright, to show what this looks like again for our example, we're going to come down here and we're going to export that AAPL bars to a CSV file. You see that dropped that here. We'll go ahead and open that. And you can see, very similar to our last example, we now have for the last 240 minutes worth of data our open, high, low, close, and volume information for our Apple ticker symbol.